کلامی کوتاه از فرهنگی بزرگ. A few words about a great culture. کنکاش فرهنگ ایران. Council on Persian Culture. به نام ایران و ایرانی، کلامی کوتاه از فرهنگی بزرگ، نگاهی است به فرهنگ نیاکانی. فرهنگی مردمی و انسانی که از هزاره‌های پرفراز و نشیب تاریخ سینه به سینه از نیاکان ما به ما رسیده و آشنایی بیشتر با این فرهنگ که بر اساس راستی و درستی بنا شده میتونه ضامن حفظ هویت ایرانی ما و فرزندان ما از هر دین و آیین و قوم و نژادی که هستیم و در هر کجای جهان که زندگی میکنیم باشه. On behalf of the Council on Persian Culture, and in light of a tragic incident that happened last week and its aftermath, Council founders and the associates, the individuals and institutional member organizations condemn any kind of violence against anybody, anywhere in the world, especially against any and all minority groups. Our common social justice belief system and its values as Iranians, reaching us through the millenniums from our common ancestors, is built upon good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, which enables each and every one of us to be kind, to be good, and lead. We are the inherent and beneficiaries of the first Declaration of Human Rights by the founder of Iran, Cyrus the Great, and as such, adherent of it. May God bless the beautiful soul of all those victims of violence. Requesting a few moments of your time in silence and in their honor. با درود بر شما هم میهنان ارجمند، میهمان این بار برنامه کلامی کوتاه از فرهنگی بزرگ خانم دکتر پارمیس خطیبی هستند و پرسش و پاسخ این بار ما به زبان انگلیسی خواهد بود و من هم بایو مختصری از خانم دکتر پارمیس خطیبی رو که آماده کرده ایم در ابتدا برای آشنایی بیشتر با ایشون برای شما میخونم. People of the world in general and specifically Americans are living longer thanks to medical advancements. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are able to access or afford care. A daughter of educators, Dr. Parmis Khatibi was exposed to and embraced science early. Teaching and treating the underserved is also in her DNA. She spends her days with patients fighting the cycle of opioid addiction and other life-threatening diseases. Away from the clinic, she is fighting stereotypes, lifting up young women. Dr. Khatibi currently serves as chairwoman and chief operating officer for a healthcare corporation which provides mental health, pain management, and addiction medicine care to the most vulnerable community members in Southern California. Dr. Khatibi also has a clinical practice at University of California, Irvine Health Medical Center and serves as a clinical adjunct professor for UCSF, USC, and is a member of the Dean's Advisory Group for Chapman University School of Pharmacy. Parmis has also been deeply involved in healthcare policy serving as an inclusive and tenacious advocate for patients and providers through her work as a special government appointee to the FDA's Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee. In her role, she advised the FDA Commissioner on risk management, risk communication, and quantitative evaluation of drugs for human use and for any other product for which the FDA has regulatory responsibility. She was also appointed and served as a public official to the HIV Planning and Coordination Council and Care Strategies Task Force. Under her leadership, she provided oversight of strategies to improve outcomes along the HIV care continuum and needs assessment for persons living with HIV. She was an advocate for Iranian American men and women living with HIV to foster self-sufficiency and reduce the stigma and discrimination within the community. Parmis is dedicated to learning about and becoming engaged with the most pressing challenges facing future generations and dedicates her time to philanthropic issues. As past chairperson of the World Affairs Council of Orange County and the youngest female to serve, she has been dedicated to educating and engaging Americans on global issues and fostering greater awareness and understanding of trending global topics such as the state of the economy, national security, and global health. Dr. Khatibi also serves as vice chair for Farhang Foundation's Generation Council and is dedicated to the continued success, education, and passion of young Iranian Americans and the community at large. She strives to celebrate her Iranian heritage and culture by educating and promoting the richness of Iranian art, music, and cuisine by inspiring and engaging generations of proactive members, leaders, and volunteers to share the rich Iranian culture for the benefit of the community. Dr. Khatibi is the statewide president-elect for California Women's Leadership Association. Through her leadership, she engages college students, young professionals, and all women interested in public service to come together to effect meaningful change in their respective communities and governments through education and advocacy. She is dedicated to launching new women leaders into elected office and other key positions of leadership by developing strategies for those who seek to become part of the political process or become community leaders on subjects of personal importance. The organization also is highly involved in mentoring the younger generation of women and helping them understand the importance of public service and advocate for causes of importance to them. As a passionate advocate for girls, she has collaborated with Girls Incorporated to mentor girls to be strong, smart, and bold. She has also spearheaded Girls Inc. programs specific for the Iranian community to teach girls about self-esteem and self-confidence. She has provided life-changing experiences and solutions to the unique challenges girls face and provide mentorship to girls to help them grow up healthy, educated, and independent. Parmis has also worked with UNICEF to shed light on bringing awareness of human trafficking and has served as the advisory council member to Invisible Children to work on putting an end to the LRA, Lord's Resistance Army conflict, and bring home every single one of the abducted child soldiers in Africa. Parmis genuinely personifies a life dedicated to community service through her commitment, passion, and efforts in furthering the advancement of her humanitarian causes and efforts, all while preserving her ethnic heritage through generations. She currently resides in Southern California. Dr. Parvis Khatibi, we are honored to have you in our program. After that introduction, Dr. Parmis Khatibi, you, as one of the board members of the Council on Persian Culture, I would like to take this opportunity to therefore welcome you to your own program, A Few Words About a Great Culture. And I would like to start with the first question. In your opinion, what is gender equality and why is it important in culture?
Thank you very much, Dr. Merfar, for that lovely introduction and such an important question. Before we start about gender equality, I just want to mention gender equity. Gender equity is the process of being fair to women and men. And why that is important to mention is because equity is what leads to equality. Gender equality requires equal enjoyment by women and men of socially valued goods, opportunities, resources, and rewards. Where gender inequality exists, it is generally women who are excluded or disadvantaged in relation to decision making and access to economic and social resources. Therefore, a critical aspect of promoting gender equality is the empowerment of women, with a focus on identifying and redressing power imbalances and giving women more autonomy to manage their own lives. Now, gender equality does not mean that men and women become the same. It only means that access to opportunities and life changes is neither dependent on nor constrained by their sex. And achieving gender equality requires women's empowerment to ensure that decision-making at private and public levels and access to resources are no longer weighted in men's favor so that both women and men can fully participate as equal partners. So in my humble opinion, that is what gender equality is. Now, why is it important to culture? Let's not forget that culture is always in constant motion. And when we talk about culture, we often mean the intellectual and creative products, including literature, music, drama, and painting. And another use of culture is to describe the beliefs and practices of another society, particularly where these are seen as closely linked with tradition or religion. But Dr. Merfar, you have to realize that culture is more than that. Culture is part of the fabric of every society, including our own. It shapes the way things are done and our understanding of why this should be so. Hence, that is why gender equality is so important to culture, because these expectations about attributes and behaviors appropriate to women or men and about the relationships and relations between women and men, in other words, gender, are shaped by culture. And so the gender identities and gender relations are critical aspects of culture because they shape the way daily life is lived in the family, but also in the wider community and the workplace.
Thank you, Dr. Parmis Khatibi. Let me focus on our motherland right now. Iran may have claim to more surprising changes in the past century than maybe any other country existing continuously during that period. Among these changes have been notable alterations in women's roles and status. Can you discuss the history of how women had equal rights to men and then lost them and are right now struggling to regain their rights due to the social transformations that have occurred over time?
You're absolutely right. There have been seismic changes to Iran when it comes to women's rights, and they have changed according to the form of government ruling the country. The ideas and concepts of women's rights have changed daily, and these shifts come from standard views such as history, legal, and cultural laws, and occurred through daily conversation and individual choices. Just to give you a brief background, Dr. Marifar, of the history of women's rights, the rights and legal status of Iranian women have changed since the early 20th century, especially during the past three systems of government. During the Qajar dynasty that ruled Iran from the late 1800s to the early 20th century, women were isolated. They were not engaged in politics, and their economic contribution was limited to household work. These conditions dramatically changed during the Pahlavi dynasty that ruled the country from 1925 to 1979. Women had much more freedom. Women's rights and freedoms were established through the leaders' wishes for Iran to become a more modern European-style country. And this era marked the period where women were not required to veil themselves and gained access to universities. You also had the era of the White Revolution and the modernization where women saw greater legal reforms and voting rights and family protection laws, as well as increased participation in the economy. However, during the events of 1979, these freedoms were retracted and women's rights were severely restricted in Iran. You saw the closure of women's centers and the decline of women's contributions to the economy. Now, in current day, there have been some slight improvements, but what I will say is for the past 40 years, women have resisted any attempt to deny them rights previously won. They have waged a war on the streets, on social media, and even the privacy of their homes for equality and against any attempt to impose on them a broad range of control. And when I say women, I mean all women, liberal and conservative, religious and secular, old and young. Women are already growing conscious of their rights and are expanding their participation in society. And even today, women remain the most vocal group, pushing back against any societal control. This generation of Iranian women is as bold as its predecessor, and in fact bolder. They're unafraid to speak out and determined to secure the legal, social, and personal rights they believe they are due. And so they will continue to push the boundaries. I hope what we will see is the continuation of this women's rights movement get even stronger, and to end the discrimination against women and truly have women have that equality that we'll be talking about later on in the interview.
Thank you, Dr. Khatibl. Let me follow up with the fact that Zoroastrianism was the primary religion of the Persian Empire prior to Muslim invasion of Persia. Can you discuss the equality of men and women during the time, and if Zoroastrianism discriminates between them?
Zoroastrian religion does not discriminate between men and women. I believe the equality of gender remains a feature which has singled out Zoroastrians from their compatriots throughout history. And if you look in the Gathas, Zoroaster specifically exhorts men and women to use their own unclouded judgment to decide if what he, Zoroaster, advocates has a relevant message for them. And it is particularly noteworthy that throughout the Gathas, he addresses both men and women, indicating that they are partners in trying to increase the amount of goodness and trying to defeat the forces of darkness. This equality of address implies respect towards both sexes and a belief in the competence of both. So indeed, the lack of gender prejudice is one of the fundamental tenets of Zoroastrianism and is seen in societal organization, in later texts and the priesthood, and also in the wedding liturgy. A woman's willingness to speak her views in the presence of her partner and for those views to be accepted as valid was characteristic and still is. So that really is one of the unique characteristics of Zoroastrianism, and how from the very beginning of time it had no discrimination between men and women.
And the last question that I have is with regard to the Persian culture of Iranian people, which is vastly different of what we see regarding the equality of men and women. And as an example of this, we can say really the suspension of the family protection law that occurred since 1979. With a stroke of a pen, this progressive family law was suspended. My question is that did this start the demise of women's equality in Persian culture, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Remember, Dr. Merfad, that the theocracy's suspension of the family protection law that was enacted under the monarchy once again put women at the mercy of men in the family. And let me just go back a few decades here to what that family protection law was. Iranian women made considerable progress during the Pahlavi era, which was from about 1925 to 1979. Education for both girls and boys was free. When Tehran University opened in 1936, Iran's first university admitted both men and women. In 1963, women acquired the right to vote and run for parliament. Under the family protection law, women won the right to petition for divorce and gain child custody. A husband could no longer unilaterally divorce his wife or automatically gain custody of the children. The marriage age for girls was raised from 13 to 18, and men needed the court's permission to take a second wife. So there was so much goodness that the family protection law did. And remember, by 1978, 22 women sat in parliament, and 330 women served on elected local councils, and 1/3 of university students were female. 2 million women were in the workforce, and more than 146,000 of them in the civil service. However, during the 1979 events, women's expectations were not realized. The new theocracy systematically rolled back 5 decades of progress in women's rights. Women were purged from government positions. All females, including girls as young as 5 years old, who were in first grade, were forced to observe the hijab. Family laws were scraped, but I have to tell you, Iranian women are true Shirzan, because the energy that these women displayed during these events propelled them deeper into the public arena to regain their rights. And the result is one of the most dynamic women's movements in the Islamic world, and female activists who have won international recognition in a wide array of professions. So yes, since 1979, women have persistently emerged as one of the most dynamic political forces in the Islamic Republic. And despite many obstacles, they have won considerable freedom in education, employment, the public sphere, and personal dress, all of which will be difficult to completely roll back. The struggle for women's rights is central to the larger struggle for individual rights, and that has become one of the 4 top issues in the country. The women's issues are important to both the modern and traditional sectors of society, so the pressure for expanded rights will continue no matter who is in power. But one thing to be for sure, Dr. Merfar, is Iranian women are powerhouses, and they will prevail and regain all of these lost rights and definitely win a larger role in society.
با درود و سپاس به شما و به تمامی همراهان ارجمند، فرهیخته و گرامی کلامی کوتاه از فرهنگی بزرگ. خرد و عشق به همراهتان و تا درودی دیگر بدرود.